To celebrate the release of the new Robocop game, Robocop Rogue City, and the long-awaited documentary RoboDoc, now on Prime Video, I'm revisiting Robocop 2 and 3 to examine what I think works and doesn't. If you haven't seen my big video on the dramatic character elements of Robocop 1, I highly suggest you check that out. It's my favorite movie of all time, and I'm happy to be here talking about the sequels. Robocop 2 is a movie I'm conflicted on. There's a good amount of it that's quite fun and inspired, and there's an equal amount that's underwhelming and unfocused. It suffers from the problem of a lot of sequels in that the story has already been told. Much like our most famous modern action series John Wick, at the end of the first movie, he's gotten his revenge. The character has gone through their journey. So what do you do in a sequel? You invent more reasons for him to get into more action, but there's nowhere else to go with the actual character development. At the end of Robocop 1, Murphy's journey is complete. The man who became a machine is now a man again. He got his revenge, he knows who he is, and he's ready to go into the future as something new. We didn't need anything more than that. So, the way I see it, a sequel to Robocop has to present several things to justify its existence. A significant progression of world events, an interesting villain with a strong connection to Robocop, and most importantly, a compelling emotional direction for Alex Murphy. And unfortunately, despite all of Robocop 2's good ideas and entertaining moments, it doesn't satisfy any of these. It's a film that suffered many pre-production problems, with a script written by Frank Miller, writer and artist responsible for big comic book hits like Batman Year One, 300, and Sin City. Instead of going with the sequel ideas developed by the original film's writers, Ed Neumeyer and Michael Miner, the studio went with Miller's script, though they ultimately decided his script would be too expensive and far too bizarre to film, thus it was heavily rewritten. The resulting film is one that, in my opinion, contains too many ideas, a bit too much camp and silliness for my taste with the really over-the-top commercials and comedy bits, and sadly undoes a lot of the character evolution seen in the original film. The tonal difference is noticeable right away, as the absence of the original film's director, Paul Verhoeven, is impossible to ignore. This time directed by Irvin Kershner, most notable for The Empire Strikes Back, the movie unfortunately has a less gritty feel. I'm no expert in cinematography, but a lot of Robocop 2 just feels plainly shot. Everything is in frame, it looks fine, it's lit fine, but the style just isn't there. It comes across as a bit of a cheaper production just because of the camera work and the look of the film, despite being made on a comparable budget. Paul Verhoeven very much took the idea of Robocop and made it his own, crafting a masterpiece of science fiction, drama, action, and satire. Without him, without his vision and emotional connection to the material, Robocop 2 feels like a movie anyone could have directed. The first thing that really doesn't sit right with me, as a Robocop fan, is how robotic Robocop is in a lot of this movie. That may sound like a weird complaint to someone with a superficial appreciation of the first movie, but the big emotional payoff of Robocop 1 is seeing Alex Murphy emerge as the human under all the metal armor. He voices his feelings, he recovers key memories, he acts more emotionally as the movie goes on. It ends with him stating his name as Murphy, not Robocop, and giving us a heartwarming smile before the credits roll. We're left with the sense that this is a new Robocop from this moment on. Alex Murphy is back, and he's only Robocop in his armor and his programming. Seeing him return in the sequel, he feels like he's regressed back to his state before all the character development of Robocop 1. He feels very cold and mechanical, acting more like a Robocop action figure than Alex Murphy, and that's really disappointing to me. Though there are many great scenes that I definitely enjoy as a fan of the action and the humor. Robocop ricochets a bullet off a door to kill a guy holding a baby as a hostage. He walks into an arcade of misfit kids and says, "Isn't this a school night?" to be mocked and bullied by all the kids. It's great stuff. A couple of the commercials, while I don't like how exaggerated they are, definitely make an impression and give me a laugh.
It took 2 days to download specs from
And I like the intelligence of the new villains to use Robocop's assets against him, using electricity and magnets to take him down. They cut his body apart and dump it at the police station to mock the department while they're on strike, though I don't know why they didn't just kill him. And while Robocop isn't nearly as Alex Murphy as I'd like him to be, we still see that he has a conscience and wants to do the right thing. When he enters the drug lab, he doesn't come in guns a-blazing. He recognizes that this place is staffed with what are likely poor, desperate immigrant workers. He sees a baby being kept here at the workplace. He recognizes the situation for what it is and tries to target those in charge. He's searching for the manufacturers of Nuke, which is a highly addictive drug that's wreaking havoc on the poor population as Detroit falls into chaos, which is the actual goal of OCP. Since Detroit is in massive debt to OCP, when they default on their payment, OCP will exercise their right to take control of the city, making it private, and their plans for Delta City will move forward quickly. The police strike has been largely engineered by OCP, and as the city falls into chaos economically and criminally, OCP is in a great position to take over. Unlike the first movie, there's no direct connection between the main villain and OCP this time. Clarence Bodiger originally seemed like an independent bad guy, but turned out to also be doing the dirty business of Dick Jones at OCP in exchange for a position of power during the construction of Delta City. In Robocop 2, our villain is Kane, the leader of a drug gang. He's a pseudo-religious figure with a god complex. He's got a hot girlfriend that does his bidding for him, but also doesn't like his brutal methods. And he's got a young boy that's a total psychopath running his day-to-day operations and deals. Kane is an alright villain. I'm glad they didn't try to copy Clarence Bodiger by having someone even more eccentric. Instead, Kane is quiet, reserved, seemingly disconnected emotionally from what's happening a lot of the time, though his methods are quite cruel. He's got some good scenes that show off how horrifying he can be, but we don't spend enough time with him because the movie just has too many things going on. OCP, in the meantime, is trying to replicate the success of the original Robocop program, using more fallen police officers to build new prototypes. Robotic officers literally called Robocop 2, which is a fitting metaphor for the movie itself. The experiments show that trying to recreate the original Robocop is doomed to result in failure, and here we are with a movie sequel that fails to match the original as well. But why is that? Well, it's because the movie uses up all its good ideas in the first half. The best of those ideas being that Robocop is stalking his family. It's the most human thing he does in the whole movie, and it's haunting. This man transformed into a machine, knowing who he was, can't let go of his memories, and so he parks outside his wife's new house and watches her. She's become incredibly disturbed and files a lawsuit against the department. Murphy is scolded by a lawyer from OCP, told he is not human, he is only a machine, he could never be the man his wife needs, and he needs to stop tormenting her and accept that his life is over. It's a powerful scene. It's probably the best scene in the movie, one of the best in the entire series, because it deals with Murphy, not just Robocop. Robocop is more than a cool robot man that shoots bad guys. He's a tortured man with intense feelings that can't do anything about them because he's trapped. He's a tragic character. This stuff about his family should have been a thread that goes through the entire story. Maybe they could have somehow connected his family to the story of Kane. I'm just throwing out a couple of ideas, but the villains could have located Murphy's family and threatened them. Or maybe in Murphy's passing, they haven't been able to pay the bills and they fall into financial troubles and his wife gets addicted to Nuke. There's all kinds of stuff you could do. But sadly, this plot point is resolved immediately. Right after the heartbreaking conversation about him not being a human anymore, his wife comes in and Murphy just pretends to be a soulless machine, claiming that he has the face of her husband only as a way to honor his memory, and he is not that man.
They made this to honor him. No. Your husband is dead. I don't know you.
It's a sad moment, and it should have been an emotional climax somewhere near the end of the film, or it should have led to something else happening after. Instead, this whole emotional conflict is tossed away, and the rest of the movie has Murphy regressing into old Robocop behavior, which is just not what I want. It's like they said, let's get all that emotional stuff about his past and his family out of the way as soon as we can, so we can get to him on the street shooting bad guys. There's a moment later where, after being reassembled, he insists that he is Alex Murphy, not Robocop, only to be told again that he is wrong. So these ideas are still there, but they just don't go anywhere. There's no payoff to it because the movie eventually just turns into Robocop has to stop the bad guy, and that's it. This is the first example of a great idea being squandered in Robocop 2. The next is the part about reprogramming Robocop's priorities. Whereas the moments involving his wife are brilliant on an emotional level, this part of the movie is brilliant in its satire, as a committee decides to change Robocop's programming to make him a more friendly role model. Robocop 1 was a very violent film, a hard R rating in the United States, edited down from NC-17 against Paul Verhoeven's wishes. But like many adult-focused action icons in the 80s, like the Terminator, the Predator, the Alien, he quickly became a childhood icon. Action figures were created, and there was even a Robocop cartoon in 1988, just a year after the original super violent movie came out. It was a different time. I loved Robocop as a kid. I had that crappy figure that fired caps on its back. It was really lame. So much like Indiana Jones, another violent, murdering action hero, one that also sleeps around a lot, parents grew concerned about children idolizing these characters that didn't represent their values. And that cultural concern is turned into one of the funniest moments of satire committed to film. After Robocop is taken apart by the villains, he needs a multi-million-dollar repair job. And at OCP, there's a new woman working her way up the company that has her own ideas for how to make a new Robocop. This is our Bob Morton of Robocop 2, only sleazier and actively working against our hero. As Robocop is being rebuilt, she pitches the idea to an OCP committee that they should use this opportunity to update his behavior and priorities, clearly as an attempt to sabotage him and make way for his successor. The committee echoes all the concerns of real-world parents, seeing their 7-year-old boys watching 80s action heroes on HBO or in cartoons, thinking they're great. And they submit every hilarious idea you could imagine to water down Robocop and turn him into a big pussy.
All that destructive behavior. He's become a role model for our children. Now what are we teaching them?
You have a point.
He could speak out on environmental issues.
Don't see any reason why not.
For all the shooting he does, I've never once seen him take the time to do anything nice, like visit an orphanage.
They pollute his mind with so many new directives that the guy can barely even function anymore. Instead of 3 solid moral directives, he now has hundreds to follow, many likely contradicting each other. Restrain hostile feelings, promote positive attitude, suppress aggressiveness. What is all this crap? Discourage harsh language, talk things out. There's even a little jab at the studio saying avoid Orion meetings, as the studio was going bankrupt in these years, and I imagine actually working at Orion during Robocop 2 was pretty shitty. Don't rush traffic lights. Don't run through puddles and splash pedestrians or other cars. Don't say that you are always prompt when you are not. And my personal favorite, don't walk across a ballroom floor swinging your arms. Man, they had a lot of fun with this part of the movie. After being forced to accept that he is no longer human, he is only the property of OCP, these hundreds of directives settle into his mind, and he is a reborn Robocop, polite, friendly, and unintimidating.
Ready for duty, partner?
You betcha.
Let's go.
Something I'd rather do.
He sounds terrific. Something's wrong.
This stuff is absolutely genius. Overall, the campiness of Robocop 2 is a little too much for me. The world becomes too exaggerated for me to believe, with stuff like rioting Little League baseball teams being led by their coaches to rob electronics stores. But a lot of the jokes here are really good, and if the rest of the movie were more solid, this sudden turn into outright parody would have landed even better. We get a lot of good stuff here. It's awesome to see Lewis using Robocop as armor as she advances forward, and Robocop is so confused that he's reading a dead guy his rights. He's lecturing criminal kids on nutrition and how they're disappointing their parents, and Lewis gets fed up with him refusing to drive faster than the speed limit. Robocop recites poetry to kids vandalizing a fire hydrant, and he fires his gun at a guy for smoking.
Thank you for not smoking.
This is all great, but we have fallen further into Robocop just being a machine. His humanity, reduced from the original, is now completely buried. It's used to excellent comedic effect, I must admit, and he does resolve it by electrocuting himself to reboot his system, but much like the excellent scenes regarding his longing for his family, this too is too quickly resolved. Instead of Robocop having to deal with the confusion of his directives and overcome it as the movie goes on, it's just played as a one-off gag and then forgotten about for the rest of the film. And that's fine, not everything has to be an hour-and-a-half long conflict, but what I'm saying is Robocop 2's best ideas are spent early and resolved quickly, happening completely separate from the movie's main conflicts, which are OCP's business and Kane's villainy. Everything about Robocop's confused directives happens in this 10-minute section of the movie that feels like a tangent. It's resolved, and then Robocop is like, oh yeah, I want to get Kane, let's go get him. But really, Kane is his first thought? He cares this much about him? He's been super focused on this guy since the beginning of the movie, but there's no aspect of personal investment in his mission. He's just gotta get the bad guy cause he's making drugs? There's not much to it. It's certainly no Clarence Boddicker revenge story, I'll put it that way. And that's Robocop 2's really big problem, the lack of emotional investment in what's actually happening in the story. Robocop resets his programming by electrocuting himself at the 58-minute mark of the movie, and from there's another 50 minutes where he just doesn't have anything to do. Robocop is all better now, no more conflicting directives, he's not thinking about his family or his humanity, he's just gotta get Kane, gotta get the bad guy. It's not directed badly or anything like that, it's certainly not as cinematic as Verhoeven's work, but it's fine, Robocop gets some good kills, but the emotional connection to what's going on isn't there. The rest of the movie is all plot that doesn't have much to do with our central character. The police bust Kane, the crazy lady at OCP uses his brain to make a new Robocop and control him with nuke supplies, the mayor of Detroit starts a fundraiser to save the city by paying off their debts to OCP, Kane's gang offers to make the donation, giving the mayor $50 million in cash and gold, OCP sends Robo-Kane into the meeting to assassinate the mayor, Kane kills a bunch of people at the meeting, even breaking his girlfriend's neck, the mayor escapes through a sewage pipe, Robocop shows up to find the kid at the edge of death, and it pains him to watch him die. Even though he was definitely a little shit, he is a child and it hurts Robocop to witness this. Okay, that's decent. That's a way to form a personal motivation to go after Kane, the death of a child, but this is an hour and a half into the movie. There's only 20 minutes left, and it's a little late to be establishing something like this. After this, we get the big reveal of Delta City and Kane to the press, showing a real downgrade in subtle imagery with OCP using Nazi imagery for their banners outside City Hall. And we get to see the consequences of this lady's moronic idea to create a robot soldier with the mind of a psychopath that lives on a supply of drugs. She didn't mention the drug dependence detail to the CEO, so he's up there waving around a bottle of nuke, which drives Kane crazy. Robocop shows up and they have a big fight using some miniature effects that are, for the most part, really good. Some of this action still looks incredible. Kane starts rampaging through the streets, killing cops and civilians, and all OCP cares about is their image. We get a great line from the CEO saying that they need to put together a spin team.
This could look bad for OCP, Johnson. Scramble the best spin team we have.
There's a lot of competently put together action here. I just find myself bored with all of it because I don't care at this point. Robocop decides to give Kane some nuke to distract him, sending Lewis out, who could easily have her face ripped off by this thing. He jumps on him, they wrestle for a while, banging around. Robocop rips Kane's brain out and smashes it on the ground, and it's over. The CEO gets another great line.
So many dead and wounded.
Of course, there won't be any trouble from the dead ones.
They'll have relatives. They always do.
OCP decides to blame the crazy lady for absolutely everything that happened. The CEO drives away, ignoring the press. Lewis comments on how the CEO is getting away with it, and Robocop responds by saying, "Chill, bitch, it's fine," and the movie ends.
That son of a bitch is getting away with it. You can't even touch him.
Patience, Lois. We're only human.
Honestly, by the time Robocop 2 ends, I'm just glad it's over, because I don't think there's much value in the last 45 minutes. Robocop himself isn't in the movie very much at that point because he doesn't have anything to do in the plot, and there isn't anything to become invested in. If what you like about the original Robocop is the funny satire and social commentary and action, then you probably like Robocop 2 a lot more than I do. For me, Robocop 2 is a movie where all the best ideas are used in the first half. Ideas that should have been the main focus, or at least extended and integrated into the main plot. It goes much further into comedic territory, the villains are for the most part divorced from Robocop as a character, the cinematography is lacking, and by the end it feels like Robocop hasn't grown as a character. Instead, it just feels like he's gone backwards, and now just functions as a law enforcement machine just like OCP wanted in the first place. The world hasn't progressed much either. In Robocop 1, OCP was planning Delta City, and there was a lot of crime, and then there's a police strike. In Robocop 2, OCP reveals Delta City to the press, still not under construction, there's a lot of crime, and the police are on strike. So really, what happened here? Not much, really. Robocop 2 does set the stage for Robocop 3, in the discussions of urban pacification and the destruction of homes to build the city. And there's a good exchange between the mayor and the CEO about building towers in places of homes, so people have clean, secure living units. The affinity for classic homes and neighborhoods is dismissed as nostalgia, treating the concept of owning stock in a profit-driven company as the equivalent of democratic government.
You'll have to tear down a lot of people's houses before you can make that thing, and then take away their homes.
We're going to raise towers of glass and steel. Every citizen will have a living unit. Safe, secure, and clean.
Won't be much room for neighborhoods, huh? Not like the kind that we all grew up in.
These days, neighborhoods just seem to be the sort of places where bad things happen. Don't be nostalgic.
What about democracy? Nobody elected you.
Anyone can buy OCP stock and own a piece of our city. What could be more democratic than that?
These are strong concepts for pushing the world of Robocop forward, and I think the movie should have started here. Start with the debt, push forward into the urban pacification units of Robocop 3, and have Kane be integrated into that storyline, and then use that to bring in Robocop's family somehow as they're affected by OCP's plans. So the stage is set for Robocop 3, and we'll be getting into Robocop 3 in the next video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and leave a comment that helps boost the video in the algorithm. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.